In this video, we travel down the Red Sea, which separates Africa and Asia, with Egypt on the western side and Arabia to the east. In the first millennium BCE, there was a movement of people from South Asia to Africa for trade, with a particular interest in ivory, which would then pass as an important product into the commercial network of the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. In our period of this course, with Egypt integrated into the world of the Hellenistic Greek kingdoms and then the Roman Empire, particularly during the Pax Romana, this served as a great stimulant for trade, which bolstered this region economically and politically. Now you can see in your source reading for this week the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, which is a text from the Roman Empire of the 1st century, which discusses trade throughout this region, and it notes the importance of a Red Sea port called Adulis, which is the most important site for obtaining ivory. And Adulis exports ivory and slaves, and also frankincense and myrrh, which is used for burials and various medicinal purposes. And both products are obtained from the resin of trees which grow in the mountain regions of Axum and southwest Arabia. The city imported wine, olive oil, silver, gold, and these products went to the capital of the African kingdom, which was inland, away from the port city of Adulis, and this is the city of Axum. Axum is located on a plateau well over a mile above sea level, and this is about 125 miles from the port city of Adulis. The kingdom of Axum was rich in agricultural products like grain and barley, as well as desired animal products like ivory and rhino horns, and it also provided slaves for the market. And the Axumite king directly benefited from this profitable trade by taxing it. So the wealth of the king came from trade, taxing imports and exports, and he exercised authority over tribute-paying regional rulers. Again, we have a decentralized model of rule here. And the coins of Axum tell us something about the kingdom. One, it's important to note that the king is minting coins, and on these coins we see images of the king. It's interesting, on both sides of the coin we have an image of the king, and notice surrounding the king we see ears of wheat or barley, showing official symbols of the state, which is nodding to the agricultural productivity of Axum. And you can also note at the very top of this coin, you see a crescent or sun's disk. And so this tells us this is a pre-Christian coin. So that is noting something about the religion of Axum before Christianity. Now we also see monuments. They put up monuments which mark the tomb of rulers. These are monuments, one as tall as 33 meters high, these great stelae of Axum, symbols of the power of the state and the prominence of the ruler. And as trade moved along these routes, so did ideas. And so we see Christianity emerging in Axum, following these same trade routes. But we also see Christianity, but the link between Christianity and Axum is very early. Ethiopia is in the New Testament itself. We could see in the book of Acts in the New Testament, the Apostle Philip will convert an Ethiopian official who is in Jerusalem in the 1st century. And with this, Christianity reached Africa before it reached Europe. But in the 4th century, the Axumite king Ezana converted to Christianity. And you can see this conversion on the coin itself. So if you notice, here we have the king on both sides. On one side he has a crown. We see the images of wheat or barley on both sides. But look at the very top of the coin on both sides. What do we see? That solar disk has been replaced by a cross, marking this change of religion, and the state is reflecting that change on its coins. And the story of conversion is linked to trade. We have an account that a merchant ship from the Mediterranean in the Red Sea, it was captured, the locals massacred the crew, and they sold 2 boys into slavery. And these are brothers, Frumentius and Odysseus, and they were purchased by the king of Axum. Eventually they were freed, and they become tutors of the heir of the throne, and that heir is Ezana. So the 2 boys were Christian, and they are instrumental then to the spread of Christianity to Axum. And the boys also had the support of merchants who traveled to the region who were Christian. And so keep this in mind, this link between merchants and the spread of faith. It's a very common factor in the movement of ideas is the movement of merchants and products. They all seem to be going together, and we'll see this again in our course. So Frumentius then knew there needed to be a bishop for Axum, so he is sent to Egypt to ask for a bishop to oversee the church in Axum and help spread Christianity. And Frumentius goes to the capital of Egypt, which is Alexandria. And who does he encounter? Of course, Athanasius of Alexandria, about whom we've already discussed in our course. And Athanasius figured there was no one more suitable to do this job than Frumentius himself, and he ordains him and consecrates him a bishop. Frumentius then returns to Ethiopia, returns to Axum, where he will become the first Abuna. And the Abuna is the highest Christian official in the Ethiopian church, and this position remains all the way down to the present. So we have an ecclesiastical leadership established in Axum, but we also then need texts. And so began the process of translating scriptures from their Hebrew and Greek original to Ge'ez, which is the language of Axum. And the canon of the Ethiopian Bible is different than the canon of the Hebrew Bible or the Catholic Bible or the Orthodox Bible or the Protestant Bible. It is longer. We have books preserved in Ge'ez, or portions of books preserved that are no longer available in their original language. So we'll see this in the book of Enoch or the book of Jubilees or the Ascension of Isaiah, making this Ethiopian Bible not only important for believers, but a very important source for scholars. And Ge'ez is to Ethiopia what Latin is to the West. So Ge'ez, like Latin, eventually was no longer used as a spoken language, and like Latin, which then morphed into the Romance languages of French or Italian and Spanish or Romanian, Portuguese, Ge'ez is the precursor of Ethiopia's 3 major Semitic languages today: Tigray, Tigrinya, and Amharic. So a distinctly Ethiopian Christianity emerged in its own language for worship, and its scriptures in its own language, and its own indigenous leadership. So the leadership was consecrated by another African bishop, the Bishop of Alexandria in Egypt, and Ethiopia will share a theological outlook with Egypt, as well as with Armenia, as we'll see later in our course, but not with Constantinople or Rome. So the spread of Christianity in Ethiopia was bolstered by the arrival of the 9 saints, and these are refugees, and these are monastic figures that come from Syria and other areas in the Eastern Roman Empire, and they make their way to Axum and establish monasteries in the country. And here we see the importance of monasticism and Christianity in Axum. Now in the 6th century, the king of Axum, Caleb, sends his forces into southwest Arabia to displace a king who had adopted Judaism and began to persecute Christians there. And so we see Ethiopia assert its authority over Southwest Asia in this period. Now, what's interesting about this is that we can see what appears to be a local struggle, we can set in the larger context of the conflict between the Roman, or sometimes called Byzantine Empire, and Sassanid Persia. So the emperor in Constantinople had sent ambassadors to the king of Axum, asking him to invade because of these incidents, and consider what is the real interest of the emperor in Constantinople. Perhaps it was religion. So what is the interest of the emperor? Yes, there is that religious dimension, But there also is that concern for trade and the worry about Persian influence. So we can think about the religious as well as the economic dimensions of this international intervention.